Racket Ron from Wilson. Racket Ron, I call you Racket Ron, and you're just like the expert on rackets and balls and the such. But like, what is your on your business card? What does it say?
That actually is a very good question. I think it depends on the time of year, to be honest. I would say, it's changed a little bit over the years, but really I'm like a global tour performance guy. I work with all of our players just on global players and how well they can play tennis.
Mike, if we don't have cards sent that say global tour performance guy, we have failed.
I mean, that's definitely what we're going to put up in the lower third.
If the font below Racket Ron doesn't say global tour performance guy, we should quit.
We're going to change it right now. It's going to change right now.
We should absolutely find new ways to not make money. Racket Ron, in all seriousness, welcome to the show. It's been great. The content that you've helped us build through my process with 20 years with one racket and switching over to the Wilson shift. I got to be honest, the returns have been real good. Just chopping fools in my dingles game. Unbelievable. All of a sudden, the forehand can jump again. Ball stays down. A little bit of love. The late save on the baselines. I have loved it. People have loved the content, taking us through the Wilson String Room at the U.S. Open. If you haven't seen those videos, please check our Serve channel to go back and check those out. The question that I kind of want to start this conversation with is this time of year, right? Players are either playing to make World Tour finals, but there is kind of in every player in the back of their minds, there's an eye towards next year already, right? Next January, what can we do? As Wilson's racket guy, and the difference between Wilson and some other brands is when I was with Babolat, we would have the rackets. I would send it to, a Racket Ron person, and outside of Babolat, they would come back to me. Wilson does everything in-house for their players, so these questions are extremely relevant. You have a Queen Wen. She's in full flight. She's probably not going to change much, I'm guessing. But is your inbox full every day with players going, are there new strings? I'm Stefanos. I'm looking to get back into the top 5. Is there any way I can get a little bit more love on my first serve return? I'm on Jabeur. I have the next 6 weeks to get ready for Australia. I'm looking for something different. Are you constantly fielding emails or calls from players, agents, et cetera, kind of looking for those next trends and those suggestions to just get some sort of advantage going into next year?
That's exactly what's happening this time of year. I got to tell you, it's everyone has that question. Is there something out there that may improve my performance a little more? And sometimes they have ideas. They may say, oh, I want to try my racket with a different string pattern. But in most cases, they just look to Wilson and to me just to say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. I might need a little more whatever. And can you give me some samples around that idea? The challenge I think that I really have is, yes, there's so much of the requests coming in, but the off season is so short. Like even the terminology, there is no more off season. It's like preseason now. Like everyone's talking about preseason and the season isn't even over yet.
Yeah, someone should really fix the calendar. We should talk about that sometime.
Is there something wrong with it?
Fuck me. So you mentioned the trends. What is the split between players knowing what they're looking for and just hoping that you have an answer for them?
I'd say it's about 50-50. Players talk a lot, and they sometimes have some good ideas. Maybe if I try, someone I know on tour who's playing well, maybe if I try their special pattern in my racket, I could get a little edge or something. But again, I think it's 50-50. Sometimes it's just, hey, I'm looking for a little more spin, or I'm looking for a little more power on my serve. What can we do either to my existing racket, or do I need to switch platforms to a different racket to achieve that?
Yeah, and to give our viewers and listeners some context, I can give you my experience, right? Later on in my career, I kind of got caught in the wave of poly strings taking over, and all of a sudden facing that first generation of players who not only would use it, but used it since they were kids, right? So there's a big difference between my swing path and my little, Bunty Magoo backhand, which was fine with synthetics, but then all of a sudden people taking swings as if they're hitting forehands on their backhand side with the assist from that. So later on in my career, I tried all poly and it worked great for everything except my serve, which wasn't something that I could trade off, right? I couldn't give up if my serve holds go from, 90 or 92% to 87%, in my mind, it's almost not worth the trade-off, right? So on the heels of that, our listeners, and share what you can. I'm sure they'd be foaming at the mouth to hear the answers to this, but you've worked with some of the greats of all time. So what is the process like with Roger versus Serena, right? And what are their trade-offs? And does one trust fall, or does one want to kind of go through the nuts and bolts of everything? I know Roger made it kind of some racket adjustments late in his career.
Yeah, I think that really there's a wide spectrum here. I think, working with Roger, the idea that, he's really into his equipment, very sensitive to his equipment, but also didn't want to understand necessarily the why, but just what the result was. I need this, help me get it. And I don't want to go too deep into the engineering of how it happened, but either I can feel it or I can't. Serena's a rare athlete. She could feel some of the smallest differences in equipment, but she was also the most open-minded. And this is something that a lot of people don't know about Serena. So for most of her career, we had a standing date, an engagement, that I would go down to her house in Florida in the first week of December. And her instructions were, bring me anything you want me to hit. I'll try anything. And then I'm going to decide what I'm going to play next year. And there were some times at that point in her career, that year, whatever, she felt she needed more help or more control, she would switch rackets. And that was really not the norm for a top player.
Yeah, the only other person I can think of who has that reputation for tinker, and it does take a certain amount of talent to have confidence. Like, I can switch rackets this week and win next week. I certainly didn't have that. That would have caused me stress that I couldn't afford to give the world at that point. But the interesting part to me, and we discussed it, we kind of set the table for this discussion, was the December 1st standing date. How many different options are you taking her? Is it 10 or is it 2?
It's probably between 8 and 10.
Wow. Wait,
Yeah.
wait, sorry. So like I'm fully into this shit now. So when that happens, is it string patterns? So the string patterns dense, wider? Is it strings? Is it length of racket? Is it as extreme as length of racket, or is it just a thinner model, a thicker model, string tension, maybe some patterns, combos of all of those things? What was your thought process when going down there?
So the answer is all the above. Like, we would take a look, and I would really be engaged with her coaching staff and her team, and get feedback throughout the year, what she's feeling, what they think she needs. And one of the things that she would really do is just allow me to sort of freeform some solutions. So not too dissimilar from the play test that you went through. There were times in Florida we would hit different models of rackets.
Except she could hit backhand. Walk through the different models. Continue that thought without me talking about how shitty I am.
So, certainly she's always played an extended length, but when I would give her something to try that might have been a little more powerful, so to transport that to your play test, like the Ultra, for example, thicker beam, more powerful racket, I would decrease the length a little to compensate, because I still wanted her to get the court, hit the ball in the court. This is not a back fence exercise for the day. So it was just a combination. How do you get the right string pattern, the right types of strings in the right racket for sort of that moment or that period of her career? And again, she's one of the players that she kind of switched, all over the place as far as beam thickness. She used to play some pretty thick beams, and she ended up her career in a fairly thin beam. But again, it's that magic combination of racket, string pattern, and length for her that she would adjust to and adapt to super quickly and then get the results she was looking for.
I'm surprised because instinct tells me that that's like, I would look at how do I improve backhands? How do I make more returns? Right. That was the kind of an entire thing. It's like I can handle most things on the forehand side. I can handle most things on the serve. You mentioned like giving her more power. I'm surprised that that's something that she would pursue, or that you would have the gumption to actually suggest that power was something that Serena Williams needed.
Well, this came from her. She told me pretty early on.
That's surprising.
And this, I'll never forget this because it was such a quote that you never hear from a player. She said to me, if you give me a racket with all the power in the world, I'll learn to control it. And it floored me because I was like, I've never heard that before. But it was true. I would walk her up the power scale. She, as an athlete, could adapt. And looking at how she played the game, that power was such an integral part of how she played, just like your serve to you was such the key moment of everything you did, that her power had to be big. No matter what we were giving her, she had to start with that big power game.
Unbelievable. That's like I think I've been silent on this show like twice ever. That one of it. Just give me all the power. I'll figure it out. Like, God,
yeah,
that's
what she
like
said.
a very.
Now, I did put like, a traditional, really thin beam, low powered racket in her hand. And in about 7 minutes, she adapted to it. She didn't miss a ball for probably a half hour, but she hated it. She's like, I can't hit through the court. I can't hit that opening before my opponent gets there. It's just the ball's not going. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't miss a ball in 30 minutes. She goes, it's not for me.
I just like, I'm like, if I miss one, I'm like, nope, done. That's it. Insecurity strikes. How surface dependent were her preferences?
From a racket perspective or from a playing perspective?
No, I mean, I know she's good on grass and fast stuff and but from a racket perspective.
She would really tune her game in the racket to basically hard courts. And then she would achieve some performance variations on the clay with string tension. She felt like if she got used to the racket, she could make some of those minor adjustments in the tension of the strings and get a little more when she needed on clay. But she was really tuned in onto the hard court setup.
And quickly juxtapose that process where you're taking her 10 frames versus Roger. I'm guessing it's less, maybe 2, because he was just basically looking for a bigger, rounder head where he could take more cuts on the backhand side. Is that a lazy analysis that's somewhere in the ballpark of being true?
Definitely being true. With someone like Roger, much more precise with his equipment, the sandbox to play in was smaller. We could try some things, but it wasn't going to be radically different. And, looking back on my career, there's no one that's been like Serena as far as that ability to just go all over the map and look for things. Like, it's usually a more contained area. But Roger was, I think, what struck me with him is that he was always thinking like way ahead. He was never looking for a racket to play next year. He was looking for the racket he might need in 2 or 3 years. So every time he switched, that process started at least 2 years before he switched.
I get so jealous of the way that a certain level of talent can think. I'm like, God, I just want to get through my first round at San Jose in 4 days. Can you give me something for that? So looking forward to next year, just a general kind of overview. But what are trends that you see happening in 2025, both at the pro level and for all of us chuckers on this podcast?
On the tour level, there's a continued reduction of handle size.
Interesting.
So more and more players are going to smaller handle sizes. And I think that's directly related to certainly the modern game and how the swing of the modern game is much more nuanced than it's been in the past. I'm getting my wrist to roll over or under. Like, I got these subtle wrist movements now, especially right before impact. I need to adjust, a micro adjust, we call it. That smaller handle allows you to do that. So this room I'm in, which has all the player rackets, 10 years ago, there were a ton of 4.5 and 4 5/8 on the wall. Now there's hardly any.
So that's in direct reaction to the strings being able to hold the ball longer, being able to manipulate the ball at the last second. So they're basically trying to lever that as much as possible for like kind of that late adjustment manipulation situation, right?
Correct. And we see it pretty much across the board, men and women. This is happening.
That's crazy. I've asked. I could sit here and ask you questions for an hour, but eventually we're gonna have to get to a fan Q&A because it is a fan Q&A show. Producer Mike, what do we got?
Hey Ron, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. So Basel wrote into us the other day and said, I have a sledgehammer that's been sitting in my tennis bag for 20 years while I took a break from tennis. I recently started playing a lot again, and I still love my racket. Has technology changed, or has the racket aged so much that I'm doing myself a disservice by not getting a new one?
Great question. So the racket technology has changed a lot since then. That sledgehammer racket is a ultra lightweight, very head heavy, very powerful frame. So that means you can take, some would call a bunt at the ball, maybe an Andy Roddick backhand at the ball, and it's going to go. So if he's getting back to tennis and the racket is still performing for him, good for you. Keep playing it. But I would encourage him to look at some of the newer technologies because modern rackets provide an easier access to power, more spin rates, and sometimes a lot easier just to swing through the air. So yes, technology has leapt forward since then.
So I have one question back to Basel. Hopefully they can write in, but what constitutes just quitting? Like I quit 20 years ago. Like I don't, it's 20
Took a break.
We were on a break. Is 20 years a break or did you just quit and then decide to play again? And is there a difference?
Sounds like you need to start fresh.
A 20-year break, I'm just saying.
And the
second thing is Ron said it in a way better way, in a classier way. Okay, so what we need to do, is it Basel?
I don't know. Basel.
Okay.
I don't know. BASIL.
We have a pro operation.
One or two.
Very pro operation here. Basel. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get all of your friends and family together, right? Okay. I'll wait. Okay, so now when you've done that, I want you to get a shovel and go dig a hole in the ground, right? We're having a funeral for your racket. But then what's going to happen is if you write into Mike and you can tell us that you actually had a funeral for your racket, we'll send you a new Wilson shift. I don't even know if that's approved by Wilson, but we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
I'll make it happen. Evidence. If I get a photo of the burial,
yes, that's what we need. I mean, it's a fair request, right?
I want a full video. I need a full funeral service.
I didn't think this show was, when we started the show 20 minutes ago, I didn't think it was going to get to the point where we were requesting pictures from funerals from listeners.
Just of the racket, though. I don't need it needs to be open casket, though. We need to see that the racket's in there.
A casket?
I don't know. Whatever they want to put it in.
I feel like whatever they just gained in shift is offset by having to buy a casket. I'm not sure that.
I need the commitment.
I think I just need a hole in the ground and maybe a grip stick. I don't know. Let's be creative. But we will send you a Wilson shift. Racket Ron, golden information as always. We appreciate you coming on. That was Racket Rundown by Wilson. This is Racket Ron with Wilson. It's just a Wilson fest, but appreciate the stories. The Serena Fed stuff was gold. We'll get you on again soon. Thanks, man.
Hey, great. Thank you.